Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we're going to talk about the geometry of chess openings. This is going to be part 2. In the first part of the video, we check out main examples with e4. In this one, we're going to see more examples with d4 and other openings. e4 is the classic example of the geometry of chess, where we can show a ton of examples because it's very tactical. That opening is very tactical. So let's see one, just to introduce the topic, and then we move on with other openings. So e4, we get c5, c3, knight f6, e5. So this might be a mistake, but it's completely playable, especially when they push the knight so early. Knight d5, knight d3, knight c6, d4. Very important to strike in the center with d4. C takes on d4, we take back. d6. Okay, bishop d3. Bishop d3 is going to set up this a trap. So in the previous video, we saw how we can put the queen in different places. For example, on b3, maybe queen f3, and the bishop, we can use it to set up some traps on d3, sometimes on c4, and even sometimes on b5. So this is the most important attacker in the position. So bishop to g4 is pinning our knight, but we don't have to worry about this because we're setting up this trap. Then castle, d takes on e5, we take back, and this will be a mistake because now you can easily take this knight, and it's like, oh no, wait, my queen, I just hung my queen. Yeah, you don't have to worry about that because now you have a check. And see how we use this geometry of the board using all of this diagonal. And now the queen has to move only defensive move in the position, so we give a check, and this is resignable for black. We take this bishop, and it's completely crushing. So we even have this check where we can win this rook. So this is completely winning. Okay, so I showed you the last example for a reason. We're gonna use similar tactics for this. So we're gonna use this bishop to land the bishop here. So you're gonna see it later. Okay, let's start with this one. We get d4, d5, c4, the queen's gambit, knight f6, queen's gambit decline, not taking this pawn. Okay, perfect. C takes on d5, and then some weak players might take this pawn. So I would not take the pawn, but okay. So knight f3, knight c6, e4, knight f6. They have to retreat. So see how we have beautiful pressure in the center. Knight c3, bishop g4, pinning this knight again. d5. Okay, so we can put more pressure in the center and kicking out this knight. Knight has to move, knight d5, and now we can take this knight, which is like, again, it's crazy. We're giving up the queen, but we don't really care about material because now we have a check here on b5. Remember how I told you at the beginning, okay, we're gonna give a check here with the bishop. There is some apparent defense. So they can play c6, okay? We just take the pawn, and then they go here, putting pressure on our bishop, right? So we still give a check on c7. We don't really care about this bishop because now we can capture the queen. So, okay, they take the bishop, we take the queen, and we are up a piece, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 versus 4. So yeah, this is completely winning for white. Don't be so worried about the spin. Don't be so worried about this spin on the knight, because whenever you see, not every time, but sometimes when you see this knight coming in here, it's like, okay, wait, I think I have tactics here. I have tactics because after they take my queen, I can go for this check. So always look for this check on this side of the board, attacking the d7 and the king, the d7 square and the king. If you know the opera game, you might be able to spot the tactic on this one. It's not the opera game, so it's just a different version of it with a similar tactic. So in this one, we start with d4, d5, c4, queen's gambit, e6, queen's gambit decline, knight c3, c6, and bishop f4. So if you're playing a classical game, if you're playing a slow game, don't play bishop f4. I guess it's playable in a blitz game, rapid. I guess it's fine, but don't play bishop f4. Okay, But just to show you here the example, the main line will be knight f3, and then they take this pawn. We play e3, b5, okay, protecting the pawn, and then we challenge or undermine this pawn structure, a4, bishop b4. This has been played before 100 million times. That is the main line of the Queen's Gambit. So let's go back here to bishop f4. Yes, this is not, don't play that, but okay. So then they take our pawn. And we look like a loser here because the c4 pawn now is undefended. And we try to play now e3. They play b5. And yeah, this doesn't look very good for white, but okay. So a4, we do the same thing. Bishop b4, but now the difference is the bishop is here, okay? So a takes on b5, they take back. Queen f3. Queen f3 is crushing, right? So this is kind of a mistake to take this pawn. If they take this pawn, you can use this geometry of the board. In one move, you're hitting the rook. So what do you do with black? Because you are losing the rook, doesn't look amazing. Okay, they can play queen d5. This knight is pinned, right? They cannot move. They cannot move this knight. Okay, so we're fine if we're playing black. So queen d5. Now, if you saw the opera game and you saw my video, then you can maybe spot this tactic where you play queen g3. So queen g3, you're attacking this knight and you're attacking this pawn. Remember how these three pawns are defended only once, as well as these three squares. These are defended only once. So now we can, it doesn't really matter what they do. So let's say they develop the knight. Okay, we can take this pawn. And if they defend, okay, they defend this pawn or they push this pawn, now we can take this knight and we're winning. Okay, so this is great. I'm gonna show you a little trick we can play when we are playing black against d4, especially the Queen's Gambit. So d4, d5, c4, okay, e6, perfectly normal, knight c3, knight f6, bishop g5. Yeah, pinning the knight. This is always annoying when they pin our knight. It's like, how do I get rid of this? Knight b7. Okay, this is important, right? We're setting up a trick. Knight b7, and then c takes on d5. We take back, and now it looks like they're gonna take twice here, but this is losing for white because now, as we saw before, we can take this knight, and it's like, wait, we're losing the queen. Yeah, but now we can give a check on b4. So it's the same trick. It's exactly the same trick. The queen has to defend, and now we can take the queen. Okay, so whenever they play this, remember they're removing the defender of this very important square, which is d2. This is another example that we can play against white against d4. So we're gonna go for the Englund Gambit. I wouldn't recommend this at top level, but it's completely playable if you're playing a slow game, a rapid game. So we get e5. E5, we're offering the pawn. So now we develop the knight. Knight c6, trying to recover the pawn. And let's say they protected. Okay, so now we can play queen e7. Queen e7 is preparing for this, for b4. Okay, we're gonna land there. Bishop f4. This doesn't look, they're trying to protect this pawn twice. Okay, it's actually fine. I wouldn't normally play it just because you get into these traps. So queen b4, now this bishop is hanging, right? It's like it's hanging, so they have to retreat. Now we can take this pawn. Okay, we're kind of recovering the pawn back. The absolute best move for white is to defend with knight c3. That is the best move in the position. You cannot do this because now you get into traps. So let's see the continuation of that. Now bishop to c3, we can play bishop b4. We're using again this diagonal, right? And if you have seen my previous videos, this is cross pin. We're attacking the bishop in two different directions. We cannot take this queen, it undefends the king. So if they take this, we can just take the rook. Yeah, this is bad. This is terrible for white. Now, let's say that after queen d2, after bishop b4, they play queen d2. Okay, so now we can take the bishop. We take the bishop, and if they play this, queen takes on c3, this is checkmate. So they cannot play that. Maybe they realize that, or they know that. So after we take this bishop, they move here, and now we can take the rook. So again, it's completely crushing. They have to go back with the knight, and now we can take this pawn. So it's just this is terrible for black, for white, sorry. So I'm gonna show you a game where I'm playing white. I didn't prepare anything. This is a blitz game, and my opponent resigned after 18 moves. So e4, e6, knight f3, d5. I took this pawn. Okay, they take back, and now I give a check here, knowing that I will have to come back. So, but I'm provoking weaknesses, right? I'm provoking a lot of weaknesses on these squares, maybe. So bishop e2, knight f6, castle, bishop d6, c4. I'm challenging and undermining this pawn structure. So castles, she takes on d5, she takes on d5, d4. I think we have a completely normal game. Knight c6, bishop g5. Okay, pinning the knight, right? This is kind of aggressive. Then bishop e7. Okay, it looks normal. Knight c3, knight e4. And here I have two options, right? I have to decide whether to take this knight or to take this bishop. So I decided to take the bishop, as the idea here is, okay, maybe they're gonna take here, I take, and if bishop takes, I cannot take twice. So my bishop is being attacked too many times to count, 2-3 times, right? So okay, so I have to trade the bishop. Now after they take, now I can take back. Don't try to do anything fancy, because now they also have, if you go here, if you try to take this queen, they have this extra tempo, so don't do that. Okay, so I just take the knight. That's completely fine. And this is the geometry of the board. So after queen takes on e7, rook e1, okay, putting my alignment, my rook into alignment with the queen. Queen f6, 92. So I'm also trying to gain some space for the bishop and putting pressure on this pawn. So queen g6, queen b3. If you saw my previous video, then you know I'm hitting this pawn, okay? And I don't really have to worry about, I was thinking, okay, the plan of my opponent is to play bishop h3, attacking this pawn. And now I can easily play g3, as my rook is not even here, right? If I play this, my rook was here, then the bishop can take. Okay, so that was the whole visualization. I'm gonna show you here. So I can play this, and my rook is not here, I have no problems. So after queen b3, rook d8, I go bishop f3 with the same idea. Okay, hitting this pawn. Bishop e6, protecting this pawn or overprotecting the pawn. Queen takes on b7, and my opponent resign. So objectively, the evaluation is, let me show you. Let me see what it is. Give me a sec. Okay, the evaluation is 1.82 as an advantage for white. It's not a lot. And after I was a bit not scared, but okay, if they go here, I guess I can take this knight. So that's not possible. Then they have to protect the knight, because if you move it, you're only going to worsen the position for black, right? So I don't know why my opponent resigned. A lot of things to play for here. I mean, they're down a pawn, but you can completely play it. So here the geometry of the board was putting your queen on this key square b3. Sometimes it's going to be a4, sometimes it's going to be h4, or even f3. So you're hitting these pawns that are only protected once. I would like to show you a game I am playing white, and we're gonna see the same or similar trick. Okay, we just have to be flexible in this position. Bishop g4, huge blunder. It's like, oh, this is annoying. How do we exploit this? Also look for the geometry. Whenever you have two bishops on the same diagonal, then there might be something to exploit here by giving a check on the f pawn. So we give a check, and if they take, We this comes with check, and then we can recover this bishop. Okay, it's too many lines. But they realize this. They just move the king. They move the king here. Okay, I just go back, and it's playable. Now, they play knight d4. This was a huge blunder because, as we saw it before, we can just take this knight. But the problem is, I didn't see the continuation to that. Okay, I lose my queen, and then what? Like, what is happening here? Because I don't have the check on this diagonal. But I didn't see that you can just give a check here. I was like, oh, okay. So I ended up losing this game. Didn't go for this line because I'm not that good at chess. But yeah, after they move, you just take this bishop, the queen, and it's completely winning. So yeah, don't be afraid whenever they pin your knight with a bishop. Don't worry about it and just take this, especially when you have not always, right? When you have these tactics of winning back the material.